Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 3 of the Train Crash podcast. I'm here with Luke Noble,
Hello.
and we're discussing novelty details, really, within model railways, both on the models and on people's model railways in general. So, I thought a good starting point for this is something that really sparked my initial thoughts on this. Was Bachmann's recent Class 90, where the pantograph could operate using servo motors. Now, moving pantographs is something that's always been a thing since pantographs have been around. Hornby and Lima both released models with moving pantographs rather. But Bachmann made theirs operate with a servo motor. It required a special DCC chip to operate, and probably added quite a lot of money to the overall cost of the model. And to me, that's a novelty, because if you are running a model railway, it's very unlikely you're going to have the pantograph down if you're operating Class 90s prototypically.
Yeah, and I think about it. How often would you actually need to operate that function on the decoder? Because you either run it up with the pantograph or down with the pantograph. A lot of layouts that might run Class 90 won't have overhead wires, and even if you did have overhead wires, they'd have to be installed perfectly to ensure the pantograph didn't snag on the wires as well. So how useful is it as an actual feature is a good question, I think.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't. Obviously, I'm not somebody who knows a lot about overhead railways, or even less about overhead model railways. But it just seemed like an inordinate amount of time and resources must have been dedicated to something that's going to be operated once or twice to go, oh, look how cool that is, and then move on with it. And that kind of brings us on to something that's going to be quite controversial. I propose that we discuss sprung buffers and how useful they actually are to most modelers. Obviously, we are discounting those modelers that actually do use sprung buffers. I believe some people use them for gravity shunting and loose shunting and things like that. But for most people who will operate just with couplings or anything like that, sprung buffers do seem to be a little bit of an extra cost that a lot of people can do without. Some of my favourite models, such as Hornby's W4 and B2, the Ruston, they really don't have some sprung buffers, neither do their Sentinels. And those are still very, very well regarded models. And I think there's a bit of a discrepancy between how often sprung buffers are put in. The running boards on the packets mean that it is incredibly difficult for them to be put on without it looking strange. But I just think that maybe sprung buffers aren't as good as people can make them out to be.
Yeah, I definitely agree there. Something I always think is a bit funny with sprung buffers is they're only useful if you've not got a coupling in the way for them to actually, hit another buffer for them to spring back. Because I use KD couplings and they're rigid, and I always make sure the knuckle is just in front of where the buffers are. So even I've got stock that's got sprung buffers on, like my Bachmann diesel fleet and stuff like that, I never really use them at all because they're just never compressed, and they don't get that look or appearance. Something I do find with sprung buffers as well is that compared to buffers that are glued in place or as a solid casting, is they don't spin round or come out or come loose, or you don't lose your tiny little springs that ping off everywhere that you do get with sprung buffers. So I'd always choose the loco or stock, if I could, to have a lower price point and without sprung buffers for me, I think. Especially when I'm seconds as well. I never spring buffers for that.
And I think that's interesting to bring up stock, because there's some brilliant ready-to-run rolling stock that's out and about nowadays, and very few have sprung buffers. So like Bachmann's birdcage coaches, rather, the SECR ones that were released probably 2-3 years ago, had a 50-odd quid price point, and the buffers were plastic and unsprung. Now, getting onto plastic versus metal buffers is a completely different kettle of fish, but standard things like your 16-ton mineral wagons, brake vans very rarely have them. So I think that's a discrepancy between locomotives and rolling stock that really, in real life, obviously doesn't exist. And I think, obviously, because wagons will be operated with couplings, whereas locomotives might not be operated with them, they might just exist in people's cabinets for display. But in which case, how useful would sprung buffers be? And it all kind of loops back to, unless you operate without couplings, which I can only think of a handful of layouts that do, they mainly represent gravity shunting. I can't see how useful sprung buffers actually are.
Yeah, and I think sprung buffers, when useful, are going to end up crashing your trains, which, to be fair, I do quite a lot sometimes. But yeah, I agree with you. Maybe they can justify it on locos more than stock, because locos typically fetch a higher price point. So maybe a way to further justify that higher price. Because if you think about it, it's going to be plastic instead of metal, so material cost is slightly cheaper. Springs are dead cheap, and if you mass produce it as well, it's going to be really cheap as well. So it probably won't cost them that much more per model to add the buffers in, but it's an excuse to justify the higher price points that we're seeing as a general trend across pretty much all the manufacturers.
I think price points might be a thing covered in another podcast, because we've both got some interesting ideas on that. But yeah, I think obviously it's a way to justify the price, but equally it's adding to the price as well, which seems a bit self-sacrificial, if I'm being completely honest. But obviously, I don't own a business. But no, I just think that it's interesting that some of Hornby's best regarded models, which are like the Beckett B4s and the B2s and the W4s rather, and the Rustons aren't fitted with them. And I think that's quite telling, that they aren't needed. They're a nice little optional extra, I guess, just to push that model just that little bit further detail-wise. But in the grand scheme of things, does it really matter if locomotives are fitted with them or
not? Not in my eyes, really. So that brings us on to our next kind of topic, which are the TTS sound vans. So when they were announced, we were both quite excited about them. We thought they'd be an interesting way to add that, extra depth of realism to allow, just as Hornby advertised them, really. But after listening to some of the sample sounds and watching a couple of reviews of them, I think we're both pretty disappointed by them. It took them both off our shopping lists, definitely. So if you don't know, some of the novelty sounds on it are like cows mooing, I think bird sounds, trains going past, which is probably the most relevant sound you'd ever use on it. But apart from that, they were not great. They're about £40, £35 as well. So it's a 12-ton VR van with a TTS chip and TTS speaker inside. But yeah, they're not great in my eyes.
No, I believe the actual moulding for the wagon was either ex-Dapol or ex-Airfix. It might not even be one of Hornby's own. It might be one that they've acquired over time, obviously with a reworked chassis with pickups and things. And obviously, it appeals to some people. They've clearly sold, although I don't think there has been. I think there's been 2 runs so far. I'm not sure whether there's a 3rd run announced, but I do think it's quite telling that they haven't set the modelling world alight. And I do think it's because they are a bit of a novelty. Those people who are likely to be able to spend 40, 45 quid on a wagon are probably going to want more prototypical sounds than cows mooing or trains passing, because obviously trains passing depends on train length and what's being pulled and what's pulling it. So it probably appeals to more train set modelers as such. But are those people likely to spend 45 quid on a wagon? You can get models for cheaper than that, locomotives and things like that. I know which one I'd spend my money on, and I'm not quite sure which sort of modeler I class myself as.
Yeah, maybe it's there to maybe the wrong market that they're trying to attract. I imagine it's probably quite popular with younger people, like children and that lot. They enjoy having a bit of novelty. And there's something I'd like to say is there's nothing wrong with having novelty stuff in your layout. This isn't a criticism. This is just our opinion on what we'd like to do with our layouts, really. So I think we're definitely in the wrong market for this van. I think they could have made it. It had a lot of potential. They could have made it very different to make it have less novelty. If that kind of makes any sense.
Yeah.
So a missed opportunity.
Yeah, and obviously you can go into details about whether the TTS speakers themselves are any good. That's not really our forte. I don't own any TTS models. So that's we're not going to discuss that. Although if you do have one, let us know in the comment section below what they are actually like, because obviously they've come under some quite heavy criticism over the last couple of years since they've been out. But yeah, I just think the sound vans, as you say, big missed opportunity. But again, I suppose they do appeal to somebody who does want that sort of novelty on their layout. Speaking of things that are on people's layouts and that we possibly wouldn't have on our own, flashing lights, normally on level crossings, on emergency service vehicles, on diggers and things like that. Photographers, did you say?
Yeah, lines of
yeah.
They have like flashy cameras. Absolute doing my head in at exhibitions. I've never ever got flashing lights on any of my layouts just because they just irritate me too much. Saying that, I do like other lights. So I do like subtle lights, like working street lamps, something not too bright, working colour light signals and that kind of stuff. But flashing lights are just a bit extra for me, I think. Especially the emergency vehicle ones.
I do think that they're an interesting concept, especially for the first couple of times you see them. But obviously they are used quite a lot, especially in the exhibition circuit, on the larger modern image layouts. And I think that to a younger modeler, I think they'd be fascinating. I remember being fascinated by them as a child, because when I was growing up, it was just when the LEDs were beginning to be used properly within model railways, and it was fascinating to watch the lights flash. But I think it's something that's done quite a lot. I think it suits a lot of layouts to have them. Obviously, it's not something that I'd put on my own. One thing that I would say, your RC van's got lights, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has, and it's something I like. I like the fact that it's got lights. And I like the fact that the lights are the right shade of white. That's something you often see, is you have cool white and warm white, and sometimes brilliant or bright white, and the different shades of yellow, kind of in the white. So I've got quite a yellowy shade of white for my caravan RC van light, and I'm in two minds about it. I like the fact that it's got the light. It does make it more visible, especially when it's moving. It means I can drive it in the dark as well. I guess that makes it more realistic. But if I could have it without lights for a cheaper price point, I'd probably go without the lights. But I don't mind it, and I guess it's because it's not flashing, or it's not too obvious, or it's not standing out too much. I'm fairly happy with it. Maybe something that I don't like about flashing lights is they're often static. So in the real world, you might see like a police car that's lights on going past. And if someone modelled a police car that's lights on going past on like a Magna Rail system or something like that, I'm sure I'd be pretty happy about it. But the fact that it's just static, and same with the photographers as well, you can't really make them move. Just because it's a constant flashing light, it just draws your attention away from the focus of the model, which is what I really want to see, to something that isn't the focus of the model, and I don't really want to see. Yeah.
I do think, obviously, what you're saying, I'm marginally, a majority agree with. I think that obviously a lot of scenes involve the police cars pulling somebody over, or an ambulance at the side of the road. So I think that it makes sense for them to be static. But when you're just talking about that, I thought about something, and it kind of links to the Batman Class 90 point, but this is particularly prominent for like your DAPOL 121s and 122s. The lighting functions on there required, again, a specialist DCC chip, so you could operate each light individually. So you could have the cab lit, but not the passenger compartment, and all different configurations of lighting to have running lights on, running lights off, having the rear light on, rear light off, I believe. Now, that's a bit of a novelty, being able to have just the cab lights on. It'd be particularly useful if you are, say, modelling a TMD, where there'll be no passengers. But for most people who do operate layouts that are stations or countryside or whatever, not TMDs, the ability to just have cab lights on would not be used, and obviously the saloon light and cab light would be used jointly. So do you think that's a form of novelty on model railways, or do you think that's something that warrants the amount that we're paying for the models?
I don't think that's novelty. I think that it is going after realism in maybe a more subtle way. Whether I'd ever use those functions if I had that, but I definitely think it's maybe a way to get someone to buy your decoder. So we see there's huge amounts of decoder choice out there in the market right now. The same with the Bachmann Class 90 and this DMU unit. I guess it's a way to get your customers to spend an extra £30 with you as the market becomes inevitably more competitive. But I don't think it's a novelty. I think I quite like the ability to be able to turn the lights on and off. I'm just not sure how much I'd use them. I guess it depends on how you like to operate your layouts. If you like to operate your layouts in a style or a sequence where you might take the engine up off shed, start it up, put the lights on, drive it into a station, put the passenger lights on and stuff like that. I think that'd be good fun, but maybe not. It doesn't really suit my operating style, but I definitely don't think it's a novelty. I think that's just one step closer to realism. Similar with the Bachmann Class 90, we're still trying to strive for more realism, and maybe that's a way to justify a higher price point. I feel like we're coming back to that quite a lot, actually. A way to justify more money. But I'm not critical of it now. I quite like it.
So we both operate DCC sound locomotives, and this kind of made me, what you were just discussing, kind of made me think like a lot of people will just use it to start up and to maybe use the horns or the whistle or whatever, but it won't really matter the actual sound of the locomotive. It could be slightly different. I believe the 21s, 22s and 23s, whichever ones were fitted with the MAN engines, I believe the DCC sound chip for that is wrong because none of them survive. So it's had to be based off a German design with the same engine, but obviously slightly different turbochargers and stuff, which would obviously make the model sound different to what the real ones actually did. Do you think a lot of modelers care about the realism of their sound chips?
I'd say I do. I know I do. I waited a long time for the Class 20 sound chip to become available by itself, but I went out and bought one. And I also did pay a premium price of £110 for my Class 25 sound chip, which admittedly I don't use as much as I thought I would do. But I think you buy a sound chip for a reason, okay? I think if you buy the sound chip for the reason that you may have had experience with that loco, or you know the loco well, or it's a fond favourite, you probably know roughly what the engine sounds like. Because a Deltic and a Class 37 sound nowhere near similar. So maybe for the big distinct locos, different sound chips would be good. But for me, if I was to get a sound chip for locos I've never heard, for like a Class 22 or maybe a Ruston or something like that, I probably wouldn't mind, as long as it's a generic engine sound that sounds vaguely similar. I wouldn't mind, but I think for a lot of modelers, they would want to pay, or they do want to have a sound that is accurate, or near as enough accurate loco they can possibly get. Especially
I operate a Bachmann Class 20 with an ESU sound chip. I think it's version 3, because it's a couple of years old. But obviously, because the Class 20s are A, readily available on preservation, and B, known for sounding like choppers, I think that was an important part of the decision to go with that sound chip, is because I know it was based on the 20. I don't believe it was based on the version that mine is. There could be some slight differences. I believe it was based on a slightly different one, slightly older, slightly newer rather, variation. But as somebody who just knows vaguely what a Class 20 sounds like, I think it's sufficient. I really like it. I think DCC sound is something that I should be investing more in. Obviously, as somebody who operates shunters, there's not a lot of room.
Yeah.
And I think it does kind of come back to that. It comes down to what sort of modeler you are, whether you think these are novelties or whether you think these are things that you'd like to have on your layout. And obviously, we're not discriminating against anybody who goes either way on that, because everybody's free to do what they want. It's their own model railways. There is one last point that we've got written down. We might go on a little bit longer about others, but it's a particular set of notch figures. I believe there's a couple of sets including Ladies of the Night and some people doing something that we can't say if we ever want this to ever get promoted on YouTube. But they're doing the dirty, as many would say. What are your thoughts on them, Luke?
Oh, I think they're awful. I absolutely hate them. I actually had an argument with someone on Instagram earlier this year about them. Like, I shamed their account because they were posting pictures all over it. On an account that was meant for children as well. They're posting all pictures of it all over the place. So I got into a big argument with them about it. I think it's a really weird thing to have on your layout. I think it is just so creepy and weird to have those sorts of scenes. And I think they're wholly inappropriate for the exhibition circuit as well. I remember me and my dad do a lot of exhibitions together, and we saw a model of it was quite a prestigious club. I can't remember which club it was, but they had a really big layout, a big Western mainline layout, and they had a couple of caravans, and inside one of the caravans was one of these scenes. And it was the most awkward moment of my life with my dad. It's like, let's not really look at that. We'll go look at a different layout. And it really put us off the layout, actually. Just because it was really weird and really awkward. You just weren't expecting it. And it just... But I guess it's fine if you want to have a layout that's at home. But for the exhibition circuit, I think it's completely wrong, because you see families, young children, all sorts going to the exhibitions, stuff like that. So for me, I'm really not a big fan. Saying that, I have joked about sending them to some friends before. It's a Christmas present and stuff like that. So maybe it's a little bit hypocritical, but I never bought them. I just joked and mildly threatened them with them. But I'm really, really not a fan. I'm surprised they sell and people buy them, because if your partner or your girlfriend, whoever, your wife, saw you ordering those figures and they came through the post, I'm pretty sure they'd be like, "What are you doing?" You know.
Why are you going to do? I'm going to send them to your. I'm going to send them to your house, or when I see you, I'm going to stick them on Distillery Yard somewhere. But no,
if you get Distillery Yard,
I'll stick them where nobody could see them but me. Now, I do think
in the bushes
think it's. There's an Oasis song about that. But no, I think it's inappropriate for especially exhibitions where we're trying to get young people involved in the hobby, and it seems a bit distasteful. I remember reading something on the Great Model Railway Challenge, and for one of the scratch build challenges, I believe they had to use a thong in some way, and someone wrote into one of the magazines. I've forgotten whether it was Hornby magazine or BRM or someone else, but someone wrote in just saying it felt really weird watching it because it didn't help the stereotype that all rail enthusiasts are creepy old men. And I'm completely on board with that, because it's just not in good taste, and I think those Notch figures are the same. And Notch do some amazing figures. The Death figure I've seen in some brilliant locations on layouts. I think that's quite funny.
I hate that figure.
I haven't been to many exhibitions recently, so that's probably why. But I think that it can. But again, it's something else that can maybe get overused on layouts, and it can probably become a little bit boring. But obviously, I think those figures are just done in distaste. And I think I've never seen them in a shop, so I presume it's an online thing, which would mean if you have an accountant, they're going to see you've ordered not shagging figures, which I don't think's appropriate.
No. Saying that, I do like a lot of other cameo scenes that are more appropriate, so like a postman actually opening a letterbox, finding letters, or I don't know, a farmer plowing a field or something like that. I do quite like those other novelty features. And something I do really like when it comes to novelty details is when the layout will have a a checklist of details you've got to
Love
follow.
it.
I don't know if you've ever seen them before. I
Love it.
absolutely love those bits. And that's when I think you can turn a novelty detail into something fun to look out for, and something I'd be maybe more interested in. So say if there was a large exhibition layout and the sheet included a death figure, which I normally hate seeing on layouts, but they're a Grim Reaper, that's what we're talking about. But they're fun to see when you're finding them, or a car crash, that might be something fun to find, or something like that. That's when I think you can turn the novelty features from something that is just a bit random and often I feel out of place into something that suits the scene and you can enjoy seeing, and it's something just to make it more interesting.
I remember as a kid going to an exhibition. It must have been, I want to say it was in the Leisure Centre in Leek, and big up anybody who's listening who knows where that is. But they haven't done it for donkey's years. But I think it was Leek Way anyway. And the exhibition, it's my earliest memory of a model railway. And just being fascinated by this massive layout. And like, they had little things that you could pick up, like a little leaflet sort of thing that you picked up and you had to try and find everything. And as a kid, you think you're so switched on to that because it's like, ooh, can I find them all? And it was like 4 blokes on Lambrettas, 2 people like having a tea break in the station and things like that. And those, I think you could try and make it engaging to children. Obviously, it's only going to make it more interesting for them.
Yeah, and it's fun for all ages as well. Everyone, it just allows you to look into the layout and see it in more depth than you perhaps wouldn't have seen before. Through these novelty details, which kind of adds a depth of realism and engagement with the layout you might not get otherwise. It's something that I'd really like to do on my layouts. And though I haven't done it officially, or I've not got any leaflets, I'll often say to viewers, can you find the deers or something? Can you find the seagull or something like that? See my layouts, just to add a bit more interest, a bit more engagement, really.
I've got. Sorry, you go.
Oh, you go on.
I was just going to say I've got something similar planned. Because Hardy's Hobbies a couple of months ago released a Westie 3D printed figure. Now I've got a rather fat Westie at home, so I think it'd been quite fun to have him on various layouts, possibly in the cab of a couple of locomotives. And I think that'd be just a nice little thing, because I think you find the people that do them often link layouts together with the figures that are used. I believe a couple of years ago on YouTube there was something to do with a clown that made appearances on different people's layouts, and the thing was you actually trying to find it on the different people's layouts. I think that was very good. It's just, I suppose it's the sort of layout that you want to make. It's just when you've got exhibition layouts where you know there's going to be families, it's not like a Disney film where they have like a joke in there for the adults that go over the kids' heads, because it's not as clean, it's not as easily separated when it's 2 people.
It's very obvious what it is and what they're doing. And yeah, not a fan. But like you said, you want to get your Westie modelled. I've got a model of my cat, Marmite. She lives on a barrel on Distillery Yard. And I also got myself 3D printed.
That's what I was going to say.
A couple of years back at the Great Central Exhibition, I won a competition to be 3D scanned and 3D printed by Model U. At the time, it was quite expensive to do it, so I was quite pleased I got it for free, essentially. And I painted myself. I was train spotting. So I got out my camera, put a train spotting pose, and then I painted myself up in the exact same clothes and colours that I was wearing. So for me, that's a really, really nice detail. I love having that in my layouts. It's totally out of place. It's probably my favourite detail out of all my layouts, just because it's me. And you probably tell it was me if you saw me when I was exhibiting and stuff like that.
Face reveal.
10 million subs will do a face reveal.
Hashtag get train crash pod to 10 mil.
Hashtag we should go viral soon.
I think we can get it done by the end of the year if we work hard enough.
10 million subs, yeah. And a lot of money to buy a lot of subs as well. But we're not too bothered about the subs, are we? We want to make this podcast suit for you, so let's go.
It's just what we're playing about with at the moment, really.
A bit of fun, isn't it?
Yeah, and we're trying to create a bit more of an informal tone to what we had in the first couple, because I think I sounded particularly robotic. It didn't quite flow as well, because there's there's particularly one much better model railway podcast, and we're not trying to rip off that at all. There is two others, in fairness, though. But with regards to your 3D printed figure, I'm not jealous at all that I was also at that exhibition and didn't win the prize. But now I think that there's been a big rise in that. I know quite a few people have themselves driving locomotives and buy multiple of them so they can be in multiple locomotives. That's quite cool, I think. Especially if the locomotive ever gets sold on, then you live forever.
Yeah.
And I think that 3D printing could be classed as a novelty, I guess. But I just think there's such a wide scope for it that there's just, to me, it's not a novelty. It's that adding that extra bit of detail that, like, your likes of Notch and Brazier and everybody like that can't bring into the hobby. There's accurately printed people.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Any other topics of conversation you want to bring forward now we've kind of completed our list?
No, not really, if I'm honest. I've got everything else now. What were you?
Not really. Something I would like to explore in the future is working point levers. You've probably seen them. It's like DCC concept stuff. They're
Signals as well.
Unbelievably expensive. I know a guy who got an exhibition out with them, and he spent hundreds of pounds just on the wiring of point motors. So you could have all these wonderfully beautiful cobalt levers and stuff like that. I think that'd be really cool to try and recreate for a much cheaper price, maybe. But I definitely don't see that as a novelty. I see that as an extra playability feature. Maybe.
I think, and kind of spinning from that, you've always got Dapol's working signals, and obviously people who operate trains using working signals to a timetable and things like that, and like colour aspect signals and various different things to show when a train can go. I think that is borderline novelty, but then I know a lot of people who use that to run their trains. It's, as you say, it just adds an extra level of realism to that running.
Yeah. I had colour signals on my old layout, Ravendale. That's 2.5 years dead now. And I absolutely loved them. I thought they were just the best way to enhance your operation was to have working signals. And I wish I could have working signals on my layouts. Again, unfortunately, all my layouts seem to be either industrial or too rural to need signalling. But I just remember them being incredibly fun and just really enhanced the operation. And there was nothing complex or anything. There was no block detection units. It was just manual switches. It was really good fun. Yeah.
A couple of collieries had ground signals. That's all I'm going to say. A couple of them needed signal boxes. Granted, very small ones. But yeah, and is that everything that you've got to say with regards to the topic? Just because there's a couple of bits that I want to run through before. Yeah. Recording this today on the day that Pat from Pat's Narrow Gauge Workbench on YouTube, on Instagram, and various different podcasts that he did with Railway Mania. Obviously, it's his funeral the day that we're recording this, and obviously, our thoughts go out to his friends and family. Obviously, he's going to be a massive miss to the hobby, but obviously, more importantly, he's going to leave a massive hole in their lives, and we just want to say that our thoughts and feelings are with his family and friends. Massive inspiration with regards to weathering and actually getting me interested in narrow gauge as well. But obviously, yeah, rest in peace. And yeah, I guess that's kind of it. We've now got a Facebook page, so feel free to go and like that if you'd like. Obviously, we've got the Instagram, which will be linked in the description. It just feels wrong to be plugging at the moment, so I guess this is the point we'll round up. Everything's in the description if you want it.
Yeah, you're probably seeing some of the stuff on the screen now, just as links maybe. So thanks for listening, guys, and we will see you in the next podcast. Yeah, links to everything will be in the description. Thanks for listening, watching, and we'll see you later. Stay safe and remember to wash your hands twice after birthday every time you need to wash your hands. All right, thanks, guys. In a bit.
And remain indoors.
Remain indoors. Enjoy the lockdown. Bye.
Mm-hmm.